call.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I'm here with the coach, John Brett.
And I'm here with the vet and a bunch of other vets with Mr. Ian Griffin.
We got you surrounded, my friend.
I'm learning so much by being around all these heroes. You know.
So this is crazy. So let me introduce everybody here.
Please do.
So up in the upper left, and I'm going to try to point that way. Over here, you're up there, Chavarria. So Rebecca Chavarria is up here, and she's from California. She was a soldier of mine. She's an entrepreneur, and everybody hold your ears. She's got 6 children, and she's an entrepreneur. What the heck? So here we go. What do we got, Chavarria? Rebecca, excuse me, Rebecca.
So I have Alejandro on the far left, Naomi. I have Natalia, Gustavo, Sebastian, and the baby is Noelia.
And me?
Yes, and you.
Awesome. That is awesome. So it's good to have you on here. Hey, young lady.
Say hi.
Hi.
How are you? This is awesome. So we got her, and I had the opportunity to serve with her in OIF2. Phenomenal soldier, one of the best soldiers I've ever been around in my career. And we're gonna keep waving at you, but now I gotta point up that way to Alexander Olivieri-Rodriguez, who I served with in Afghanistan. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about something here, Alexander, because I want to throw something up as you talk here.
All right, my name is Alexander Olivieri. I am married. I have 4 kids. I don't have 6. I got 4, and I'm also an entrepreneur as well.
Yes. So Alexander is has a business in the textile industry in Virginia, but he just got a place where they're building a place where he can put his textile industry. He can put a restaurant, a Puerto Rican restaurant, and he can lease a couple places out as well. So he's busy, to say the least. And now the last person I got over here is Ismael Rodriguez, who is a former mentor of mine. I served in a subordinate unit for him. Great Sergeant Major. And he's hailing from Austin, Texas. Am I right? Go ahead, Ismael. What do we got here?
Well, again, my name is Ismael Rodriguez. Of course, I know Ian for quite a few years now. I think there was a photo somewhere. No,
who is that guy?
No, oh my goodness gracious! Holy, what a mug!
No, nobody wanted to go talk to him. He looked mean.
There should have been another one. But anyways, there you go. The story behind this one is that, and why it's important to me, is that during battlefield circulation, I met this person here, and he lets me know that his daughter was a champion or steer roper. I don't have it exactly right. I know that. So I told him I was Puerto Rican, but I was a transplanted Puerto Rican. I'm now a Texan, and he told me that you're not truly a Texan until you rope a steer. So he brought that thing out, and I roped my steer. He baptized me officially Texan at that point.
Well, welcome to Texas, Ishmael. My gosh, I like that right there. I don't think I'm a Texan. I didn't ever roped a steer. We might have problems here. So Coach, we got a crew on tonight. What do you think?
Man, I love this. Like I said before, just a week or so ago, we had all the military people on. It's one of the things that I always regretted was not getting into military at an early age. But one of the things that I have learned as being a history teacher and a government teacher is how important that you guys are, not only for our freedom, but also for the country and for our protection. And I think some of the heroes that we really have in our country are you guys. I think we prop up our athletes and musicians, but without you guys, there's none of the things that we get to debate. There's none of the things that we get to talk about. And so I always learn so much more from you guys than I actually, have learned even in school. So it's great to have this type of panel. It's also great to be around all these great Americans, as I say. So the first topic tonight is I want to give a little background real quick as we do this, because I don't know if a lot of people know, but school board members in the state of Texas are elected. And so we actually I actually ran for school board one time in my local district and lost. But you have, it's just like you run for it. So when we started seeing all these things on TV with critical race theory and other issues that come up, it's not uncommon for people to go voice their opinion at a school board meeting. Just like when I was on the city council in White House planning and zoning, people would come and voice their opinions at those meetings because that's what the citizens that elect you, that's what they do. So when I first heard that Merrick Garland was getting involved in this, I was a little bit taken aback because this is the people that you should want to speak, because those are the people that elected you, the school board. So the question that we have, and I'll start with Alexander first, is do you agree with Department of Justice being involved in local school board stuff with the parents at all? Because some of the background of this is what our kids are being taught. Should it be up to the parents to be involved, or should we just throw our hands up and say, hey, look, we pay you guys as teachers, you teach them what you want to teach them? So I want to throw this at Alexander and then go over to Ismael and then end with Rebecca. But I think this is a very slippery slope when we say parents shouldn't be involved or should step back and let educators educate.
Yes and no. There are some parents that are well educated and they have good input, but there's a lot of parents that they're a little bit out there and they might have the right wish, but definitely not the right material, So, like you were saying, definitely let the people they have a degree. They've been doing this for years. They are in touch with also the current changes in society to determine, what's good to teach or not. Because we are an evolving society. We cannot be teaching the same thing that we were teaching in 1970. We have evolved, tremendously from that era to now. There's more technology. There's been a lot of changes. Like, for example, something as simple as gay rights. Back then was not tolerated. Now we're more tolerant to that. And even though I don't think it should be a topic per se, but we do need to make sure that everybody knows that at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all need to learn to respect each other, regardless of their decisions, regardless of their, desires, because at the end of the day, that's their own personal thing. So I understand parents, they want to voice their opinion, and that's fine. At the end of the day, like you say, they were voted in, so they're supposed to work for the people. But what I was reading is that some people were taking a little bit to the extreme, making threats and that nature. It's same, it's not just with the material that's been teaching in the schools. It's also about the face mask situation and stuff like that. And they were taking it a little too personal in a matter of, there was actually some cases where there was assault into some of the board members, death threats and stuff like that. And that's just a little bit out there. That is just way too much for what it needs to actually happen. And that is not conducive to, it's not helpful. It doesn't help the situation. It just aggravates the situation. And it's going to get to a point that, okay, we're not going to let the parents voice their opinions if this was going to continue to happen.
Sure. And Ishmael, before I send it over to you, I think one of the things that I should have clarified is, yes, we need to make sure that the evolution of society is something that we take in consideration, not only in education, but also just in our society. But I think one of the things that we were worried about is the indoctrination. And that's, if you're going to indoctrinate a certain age group of kids or any kids at all that are minors with your personal belief of an ideology of, say, leftism or far rightism or critical race theory or anything that could be considered, controversial. Is the classroom at a junior high or high school the place for that, or is that actually something that we should wait till they're a little bit older, like a college situation where there's debate, they can have their own opinion? So I do think that one of the things that I do love parents being involved, But Alexander, I agree with you. There has to be a limit of what they can actually do. You shouldn't be hateful, shouldn't be disrespectful. And the parents should also leave their personal opinions out of things also out of the argument and just give an opinion of what they think's best for their child. So Ismael, I think I should have clarified that a little bit for Alexander, but I wanted to do that for you. So please give me your opinion on it, because I love hearing the different opinions.
Yes. First of all, good evening to all. I would like to thank you and the coach and the vet for extending this invitation in tonight's discussion. I'm really humbled. I guess I have to preface by saying that I believe that we are the sum of our experiences, and we all have our biases. And in this case, mine are that all three of my children are educators. I know they don't dictate policy and just execute within the guidance and the laws. And I don't think they should be threatened or assaulted while executing their duties. With that being said, I acknowledge that I'm going to oversimplify this, but whenever there are violent threats, which nowadays cannot be taken lightly, and or actual physical altercations, as Alexander stated, and local law enforcement cannot or do not deal with it, then I'm about whatever it takes. And if it takes the DOJ jumping in, I'm all for it, because we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow that to take place in our schools. Whatever it takes to ensure that, our underpaid, who work so hard at educating our children, are protected and are unencumbered in the execution of their responsibilities and the scope of their work. And plus, we must remember and not be detracted from the fact that if it violates a law, if it's some type of crime, then it must be addressed. And again, if it takes the DOJ, then so be it. Now, with that being said, again, I want to talk about from the standpoint of an actively engaged and involved grandparent with my grandchildren in school. If something is being taught to them, to my grandchildren, that my daughter deems to be in conflict with her morals, her home teachings, and the raising of her children, then we will address it, and I'll probably be emphatic about it. But one thing I will most certainly not do is I will not threaten anybody. I will not assault anybody. So I think it's about order. It's about following the law. It's about morals. It's about human decency. And many people, quite frankly, have a sense of entitlement. And there are a lot of people that are morally deficient. And these are just ills of our society that bring about these situations.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you said that, because we want to be involved, but we have to be respectful doing it. And, I'm an educator, and, I've been teaching now for about 7 years. But in the last few years, I've been in the prison system. But before that, I was in the public school, and most teachers love the engagement of parents, because we always said we wish more parents were involved. But you can be involved in a positive way, or you can be involved in a negative way. And I think these school boards, what they're doing is they have a very tricky place that they have to stay. Yes, we want to take your input, but in reality, there's a standard that they're trying to follow, not just for the kids, but also not for an individual kid or an individual family, but also a standard of all. And like Alexander brought up, we are in a very different time now, with the diversity of our school districts being in the way that they are. It's not 75% white and everybody's just sprinkled in. The last school district I was in is 53% Hispanic, 38% African-American, 11% white. So that's a totally different dynamic. Do we teach different to that, or do we teach the old way, is the discussion that needs to be had. So Rebecca, I'm not meaning to take up your time. I just wanted to clarify a little bit of that. So what do you think about them getting involved in this whole situation?
So I definitely agree with everything everybody has said. I don't condone violence on any elected official, and not even the current one that's the governor of my state right now. But I do think that if somebody is not doing a job, then people should voice their opinions. They work for us. We elect them to represent the majority of the people, right? Because if there's me and my neighbor and everybody in the school running down the school board, no, we elect somebody that will be a representative for us. And if they're not doing the job, then they need to go. As far as going with, I think that we should have a say in what our children are being taught. There is, like he said, there is some immoral things happening, just and people's views and opinions and even the way that they're brought up at home are completely different. So, do I want somebody forcing their beliefs on my children versus the way that I raise them at home? I strongly agree that there should be, of course, a separation of state and church, like reading, arithmetics, all of that. Yes, do your job, do what you need to do. But when it comes to your opinions on my child, I think you should keep them to yourself, um, especially if it's a hot topic such as religion or politics, etc. Um, I also do believe, though, that it does take different people to influence a certain way of thinking outside the box. I'm first generation. I have bachelor's degree and two master's degree, as well as being an entrepreneur and an author. Had I not had different influences in my life, I might have been a different person. Um, but where do we draw the line is that if you have a favorite teacher, you'll more likely say, hey, Mrs. Smith recommended this book, or Miss Rodriguez, introduced me enchiladas. Like, there's so much that you can learn the diversity from people. So it's,
Absolutely.
as a parent, I want them to learn that. But also as a mother, I want them, they're my little hens. So
Right.
it's like,
Vet
where do we draw the line?
and vet, this is one of those issues where do you want your kids to be prepared for the real world of diversity? Or like Rebecca said, I have a certain morality that I have at home that I want my kids to stay with. And she said something I didn't think about earlier before this is I don't want someone else teaching my kids something different. I want my kids to, I'm probably paraphrasing, but I want my kids to learn what they learn at home. But in other ways, other people look at that as, hey, you're pushing your ideology on someone else if you want the school to teach only a certain way too. So I think it's a real touchy subject here. And I don't think we actually touched to what you wanted this topic to be about when it came to exactly the school board and the DOJ and critical race theory or something specific. But this is what this is about. This is a very touchy, tricky situation because Alexander said something I didn't even think about, and immediately it got my head spinning, is that we are an evolving country and an evolving society where things that when we were in school that were taboo that you didn't even talk about or see is the norm now. Now we can look at it two ways and go, hey, our country's going to hell in a handbasket, or our country is progressing. So it depends on how you look at that. But we have a very diverse United States of America, and we have to learn how to live with everybody, or we're going to keep having this division, Vet. So I really want to hear what you have to say on this.
So I took some notes as people were talking, and they're not pinpointing anything, but some things that just came in my head as we did this. First of all, when it comes to the school board, I personally agree that nobody should be attacking anybody, period. As simple as that. They shouldn't. But the school board is elected. And what we don't need is a school board that goes, okay, we're going to give the parents 5 minutes and that's all you get. And if you say what you say, we still made our minds up. Because that's been happening a lot. And that's what really deters parents. Because as the profession is in the military, one of the things that Ismael and I can probably agree on is whenever you had a soldier come in on open door policy to talk to you, they wanted to feel that they were at least being heard and you were calculating it and considering it and making a determination after you hear all the facts. And the school board needs to present that persona. that there. Okay. Now, there are many school boards that are doing that, but they are elected, and nobody should ever be, this elected official should ever be threatened or face harm. But elected officials should be held to the standard of the voters, period. And that's just my personal opinion. Regarding the DOJ, you know, when you start talking about the DOJ and federal crimes and things of that nature, you start thinking about terrorism, and you start thinking about things that cross state lines, you know, and none of this does that. And I think each state has the capability to handle this. It's just they need to handle it. Now, we've gone through a couple of years where, hey, we don't want the police to do this, we don't want the police to do this. We just need the police to do the damn job. And that's not a knock on the police, because I got a lot of people that's in the law enforcement business. But I think when we address the school boards as parents, and Coach, you know, I have a lot of people in my family that are educators, and this is not necessarily attacking the educator itself. It is attacking the direction of the school board, or having differences with that. I think that it's every parent's right to have a say in what their education is. And I think the school board is bound to listen to that. Now, whether they take all that advice and go, okay, maybe that's a little in left field, maybe this is not, that's neither here nor there, but they need to at least give that they are listening to that. That is my personal opinion. I will say I agree with really a lot of what everybody has said. There's some variances in here. I don't think that it's a teacher's job, and I would tell that to my mom in a heartbeat. I would tell that to my sister-in-law, and I would tell it to the man I respect the most in this world who's gone, is my grandfather. I don't think it's their job is to develop my child in a political sense or religious sense or sexual sense or any of those things. It's their job to educate them in their field. You know, whatever the field is, if it's a science teacher, in science. If it's history, in history. If it's this, it's that. If it's math, it's math. It's their job to educate them in the field that's approved by the state board. That's it. But what a lot of people are having a problem is is either when they go to the board, the school boards, of what I've seen, is either the state has not approved it or have given leniency to allow the local school boards to change things and have different agendas, different curriculum. Let me say that. It's not agenda. It's different curriculums. And that's what they're voicing the problem with. And I think they have a right to do that. They just don't have a right to go, hey, John Brent, you're on the school board. I'll meet your butt outside afterward and kick your butt. And I ain't going to vote for you again. And I know where you live. They don't have a right to do that at all, you know, and that's just my opinion on it. And I'm trying to make sure I got all my notes that I wrote on here. I think the biggest thing is parents don't want to feel like they're on deaf ears. Now, do we have a rational? We have a rational on every side. We all know that, you know, and they just need to be policed up. And sometimes that's a superintendent simply going in, I love you, but you're better than this. Calm down a little bit. And sometimes it's, okay, John, I need you to get the police over here and take care of it. You know, some of it takes that, you know, so I don't know. That's my opinion. I do think, though, that every parent should be hurt if their kid's going to the school district. That's just me.
Sure. And one of the things that you brought up, Vet, is, you know, if you're looking at why is the federal government involved in this at all? I mean, this is a state issue. And, you know, just as, you know, someone that's a history and government teacher, I mean, the 10th Amendment pretty much states that if there's not powers given to the United States by the Constitution, that is reserved to the states respectively or by the people of that state. So why is the federal government even getting involved in a local school board issue is just now Alexander used the evolution. This is not a good evolution. This is not a good evolution I've seen in the last 8 or 10 years where everybody wants to go to the federal government when their state or local government doesn't do something they don't like. Doesn't mean that they're breaking some federal law or even some state statute. It's that they don't like it. So they ask federal protection. So for the Department of Justice to get involved in a state issue, actually a local issue, is really not what the founders wanted when they created federalism. Federalism means we're going to keep these two separate unless there's a major issue. So I don't understand why the Department of Justice vet's even involved in this. I think they're overstepping their bounds, but I do think this is the new norm, is let's just beg the federal government for help when there's something the state or local government does that we don't like.
I don't dispute that thought. And don't get me wrong, if there's an organized group that comes in and sits there and talks about, you know, hey, we're going to terrorize this here, I got that part there. But I honestly don't see that there's going to be a similarity of terrorism in there. And we tried to, I saw on some news that they tried to associate terrorism with somebody wanting to kick somebody else's ass. And I mean, we've gone a long way from that, you know, and that's not right, because that's not what it is. That whole top row is fought terrorism, and they understand what real terrorism is about, you know. And now I'm down with, if somebody does something wrong, punish them. That's why we have the law. Punish them. Don't give them no grace. Just punch them. Yeah.
So whatever happened to calling a local police department and having a local police department deal with a physical altercation or deal with a threat as a local terroristic threat, if you want to call it? But to get the federal government involved, it's almost like you're taking away the sting of what real terrorism is, because real terrorism is what you guys are fighting, not what's going on down here when the dude says he's going to kick somebody's ass. Well,
you and I both know that where we came from, that you didn't want the sheriff to pick you up and have to go see Judge Hawkins or Judge so-and-so. You didn't want that.
Morris. Nobody want to go see Ruth Moore.
No, nobody wanted to see that, because your whole family knew about it. You was embarrassed, and they were not going to be nice to you. I mean, and I don't mean that like, hey, we're going to put you in jail. They're going to be rude to you. And I got respect for both of those big time. And the sheriff, short of grabbing you by the ear, whooping your butt in public, and then put you in jail and call you a whole bunch of names that now you get in trouble for. But, you know, it was not fun. You didn't want none of that. And the current sheriff the same way, you know.
Well, before we go into the next topic, I really want to, since there's been so much conversation since Alexander and Ismael and even Rebecca spoke, if any one of you guys want to kick back in here after we have you heard something that you would like to reiterate or even add something to, please do, because this is a topic that I think that I love to hear the diversity of what people's thoughts are in this.
Yeah, if you don't mind, John, I agree with you 100%. And I did preface by saying that I was going to oversimplify. But I think I even said so earlier, that in the case where local law enforcement doesn't get involved and doesn't do the right thing, I said whatever it takes. Because again, I wouldn't like to see my daughter be attacked because she's teaching whatever the curriculum is. So in that case, but you're absolutely right. It should never have to escalate to that level. So I'm very curious as to what has spurred. In my reading, I didn't find anything about what really spurred on this DOJ wanting to get involved. Is it not happening at the local police departments, sheriff's departments? I'm really curious at this point.
I think the vet probably has more information on that than me, because I don't know what the foundational spur, thing that happened. I think the vet probably does, and then let Alexander, talk a little bit after that, because I think I can see you wanting to talk too.
I'm gonna let. I don't have a lot on that, Ismael, to be honest. What I saw was the highlighted one was in Virginia itself, where Alexander's from. So maybe he knows a little bit more on that. But Merrick Garland was, he had came out and said we'd use the DOJ. Maybe we need to start pushing for terrorism things. And I'm like, man, that's not what he talked about a few months ago, and that's not what the president talked about either. As being a hand involved in that. And there's a thought process I have always is a more rank I got in the military, is the people closer to the ground knew more about it than the people that were higher away. Although you and I would like to think that we knew better, we knew better in the Army sense, but what was really going on the ground was the people that was close to the ground knew that way better than we ever did. And so I'm sorry I don't have an answer on that, pure answer for it. So, but I'm going to throw it over to Alexander, like the coach said, and then we're going to get it to Rebecca if she's got anything to end up on that before we go to the next topic. Go ahead, Alexander.
All right. One thing I noticed, it's been happening a lot lately in this past couple of years, is the misuse of certain words. Like, for example, they're trying to say, this is an act of terrorism or something like that. It's not, yes, by definition, promoting, terror, fear, yada, yada, yada. But there's the overall meaning of the word doesn't fit that criteria. Yes, they might be doing a criminal act, which is way different than an act of terrorism, because they're just threatening somebody. Should that happen? No, because obviously we need to be more civilized, but it's not an act of terrorism. They're not trying to blow up the building, just because, they don't want to wear a mask, or because, that's some of the stuff that I've seen the most. Obviously, we talk about teaching all this stuff about racism and in the curriculum, but one of the also big topics is about the wear mask, which I really don't know why that's such a big argument. It's not, but that is one. Like I said, that's the one thing that I've seen that has been happening a lot of in the past couple of years. The misuse of certain words, and it gets to a point that it's so overused that it no longer means what it was initially intended to mean. And then every time people hear the word terrorism, they're like, okay, it's just another case, of overemphasizing it, whatever the case might be.
Rebecca, you got anything to add to this? Because we covered a lot. I know you dropped out, but have you got anything to add on this here?
No, just to kind of say what he says, I think that people will use whatever word to fit their narrative and to give justification to any action that they feel they have the right to do. And use a play on words for like he said, like act of terrorism that fits in the agenda for bringing the DOJ into situations. Because if you just say there's bullies or harassment, like the coach said, why can't you call your locals in for that? No, it's an act of terrorism that fits my agenda of wanting to bring bigger resources in.
All right. So real quick, I got to throw a little quick.
The last thing I want to say
Coach?
before we go to the next topic is you're right. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So before we start the next topic, got to throw out here real quick. Hey, got a couple things here. First of all, we got a good sponsor here, Metro Geek, which is in Granbury, Texas. We ask if you're in the Granbury, Texas area, anything around computers, hit them up. They'll solve your problems by far. And we'll be throwing that out here for a couple of months. And the second thing, I don't have a picture for them yet. I'm about to get that here soon. But stop by our shop at thecoachingthevet.com and get some of our items, because this is what helps pays for our stuff here. So throw it out there, and now it's time to move to the real topics. So the next topic, which is under the President Trump, there was a big push to rename military bases, and the Senate approved it, and it went into the National Defense Authorization Act, and he refused to sign it, and then he did sign it. So we got 3 years, from my understanding. I could be wrong with that, and if I'm wrong, I'm not afraid to admit it. But from my understanding, to 2023 to rename 10 military bases, predominantly the Army, which consists of Fort A.P. Hill, Camp Beauregard, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Gordon, Georgia, Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Lee, Virginia, Fort Pickett, Fort Polk, Louisiana, and Fort Rucker, and all named after Confederate generals. And so I just want to start off, and I'm going to start off with Ismael on this here, being a retired sergeant major, and ask, what are your thoughts on this here? And then I'll go from Ismael to Rebecca to Alexander and then to the coach.
If you all can humor me, I would like to touch upon a little bit more background, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm also going to refer to some notes that I prepared, because organizing my thoughts at this age has become a challenge. So, as we may or may not know, we have an 8-member commission that was established again by the National Defense Authorization Act. And many will argue that it was because as a result of racial tensions that brought about a deep look or a deep dive of perceived or real systemic racism in America. These members are expected to approach the task with a critical eye towards the past, and they are charged with emphasizing on racial and ethnic diversity. Um, the list of assets that they're talking about is not only the bases, but it's also things in the hundreds, to include bases, installations. We're talking about facilities, aircrafts, ship, plane, etc., weapon systems.
Probably streets as well, like on
Yeah,
Fort Bragg.
absolutely.
Half the
Yeah,
streets, Long Street, and all that.
absolutely. Um, uh, as Ian pointed out, the commission will start by focusing on those 10 military bases. Um, and I think, Ian, I don't want to go against you, but at least in my reading, it did say completed by 2024 instead of 2023. So I'm not sure um, which one it is. But we do know it's 2023, either 2023 or 2020, early to 2024. So with that being said, and in order to approach this one, which was very difficult for me, I find that I have to separate me as a soldier or a former soldier, and me as a citizen and a lover of history separately. Um, and I'll explain them both. And by the way, I hope that the term history lover does not infer expertise in the matter at all, because certainly not. Uh, but as a soldier and having been stationed at, trained at, soldiered at, and visited some of these bases, I would say that the bases should not be renamed. And I say that with a great amount of bias and selfishness. Uh, just by the nature of the history that was made on these bases throughout my career, which include Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom. I feel that I took part in history. My soldiers took part in history. My peers, Ian, took part in the history made on these bases, and I feel that um, erasing their names, I fear that the legacy that we all left behind, I fear that it'd be lost and forgotten along with the names of these bases, which would mean, in effect, um, we did, uh, and then we didn't. If it makes sense. Um, it's almost like that almost 32-year career never happened. That's what I'm afraid of. And I fear that the eagerness to comply with social correctness, or whatever we want to call it, will cause what I refer to as oversteering, and I think we all understand what oversteering can potentially cause here, and that's a historical wreck. That's just me again, um, uh, just afraid of Alexander, Rebecca. You put in your time. We heard the story earlier about how Rebecca, left and came back, and she said, I can't leave the guys. I can't leave them. I have to be with my guys. And it just is. These are stories that touch my heart, and it scares me, quite frankly. Now, as a citizen or a lover of history, that's where I'm deeply conflicted. And quite frankly, I'm on the fence. And any one of you or your viewership can easily sway me one way or the other. And I'll explain. As a lover of history, I argue that the bases should not be renamed, based on one core belief and one core belief only. And that is, as the Spanish philosopher, and I'm going to check his name out here in a second, George Santayana, is credited with saying, and I quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." While British statesman Winston Churchill wrote, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And I believe that to my core. I believe we should not take down, do away with, change, bury, etc. Select vestiges of of history based on the flavor of the month. I think there's much to be learned from historic characters and learning them, and whatever infamous actions led to them to be bestowed those honors back then, so that we do not allow for history to repeat itself. And that reminds me of something I saw, and I'm sure Ian has seen multiple times. It reminds me a little bit of being in Germany and seeing buildings with the outline of the swastika, where the swastikas were removed, because my understanding, as I understood, is the Germans were embarrassed of that history, that they had, and they wanted to get rid of it. But I think there's something to be said. Let's learn, not bury it. Let's learn. Let's talk about it to our future, our children, our grandchildren, so it doesn't happen. So in that sense, I say don't rename them. But then, and that's where my being on the fence comes in. In my research, I saw quotes such as the following: "The Confederates," and I quote, "The Confederates killed more U.S. Army soldiers than anybody else in our history." And this was a quote from Ty Segiel, who was a former soldier and the head of the West Point History Department, in his book Robert E. Lee and Me: A Southerner's Reckoning with the Myth of the Lost Cause. And it shows how in some bases adopted the names during the 20th century, eras of racial terror, and as white Southerners embraced the revisionist history about the Civil War. Segiel also told Axios in an interview that treason is treason, and he sees no difference between the 19th century figures and the American Taliban, John Walker Lindh, for those of you that remember who John Walker Lindh is. So these arguments, may sway me to say, yeah, they're not deserving of having their names on such a position of honor, so to speak, for these bases. The military for a long time has been one of the branches of our federal government that is the most trusted, the most beloved, and so there's something to be said about that too. So history shows that the men who for whom some of these bases are named held white supremacist views and had poor military track records, which boggles my mind after I researched it for today. How men who fought to preserve the institution of slavery and betrayed our country to defend white supremacy got honored by our military. And I'll give you an example: Fort Bragg in North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne, named after Confederate General Braxton Bragg. He owned an enslaved labor farm in Louisiana, and he told Irish journalist, and let me look for his name here in a second, if you bear with me, William Howard Russell. He told William Howard Russell, and I quote, that the only mode of making the black race work was to hold them in conditions of involuntary servitude. The West Point graduate lost most of his battles as a Confederate general, and yet one of our most prestigious posts bear his name. Could that sway me to say, yeah, we probably need to change the name? Yeah, I would say so. And the last one that I'll just touch upon is Fort Benning in Georgia, another prestigious base, home of the airborne and now home of the armor, the infantry. Is named after Brigadier General Henry L. Benning, and he was a slave owner who warned that if slavery ended, and I quote, the nation would see black governors, black legislatures, black jurors, black everything. The white race will be completely exterminated, and the land will be left to the possession of the blacks. And then it will go back to a wilderness and become another Africa. And that's what he was quoted as saying. So those points I find to be valid points that these generals never should have deserved. It was just about that time in history. They never should have deserved their names being on there. But seeing what I saw and researching what I saw, probably merits the changing because they are not deserving. And based on, to me, once I read that, based on leadership by example, the armed forces core values, the travesties of justice at that point in history. Plus, we have to remember that the armed forces have been for many years at the forefront of social experimentation and change. And if the giant national defense machine embraces change, more than likely the general populace will, if historic precedence, stands true. That's all I wanted to say.
Ismael, I like your comments. I got to throw it to Rebecca and let her get in here. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. I could not agree with you more on everything that you said. A couple things that came to my mind is that there are a couple sides of me that agree, the military side, like, oh, Fort Hood, that's what, I've been there. That's how can you change it? There's so much history there. And you want to keep the integrity as, being in the Army, we're big on history, we're big on tradition, and that's our roots. Don't change it. But I was having a conversation with my husband, and one of our managers is my husband's on the side of, keep the integrity of it, and our manager was saying, no, you need to change it. And so it got me to thinking, like, okay, let's take, the United States out of the equation. What if we were in Germany, and we had not even, yeah, Germany, and we had a school named Adolf Hitler, and a bunch of Jewish children were going to it? It would be completely inappropriate, and I believe that in that circumstances, it most definitely should be changed. And then I get to thinking, well, if we erase that, then, like Fort Bragg, doing your research on it. Okay, why is it named Fort Bragg? I'm interested in learning. The town here, we have someone called Joynier. So I was like, who's Joynier? So I did the research on it. They came over, they developed the lands. One of the grandchildren is actually still one of the senators in the area. So it's interesting. Names bring up conversation, and I'm pretty sure, Coach, as you as a history teacher, you appreciate that fact. Is that okay? Where does this come from? It inspires, you know, inquisitions on what is happening. So I got to thinking about my name. So my name is Rebecca Abad Chavarria, and in the Puerto Rican culture, there's two names. There's the mother's name and the father's name, and the mother's name goes in the back. So Chavarria is my father's name, and when my children get married, my name will fall off, and their spouse's name will go on there. So I got to thinking, why not honor both? If we want to change, let's say Fort Bragg slash whoever his counterpart was. So you're forced to research both. Like for a yin, there's a yang. Why can't we keep that and incorporate both? Say yes, there was this guy named Fort Bragg. I'm sorry, I did not do the research on Fort Bragg. I'm just speaking, but there was this other person who fought against them, or there was this private who defended his line, and he was taken. So open up that other conversation, Bragg slash Smith, Fort Bragg Smith, or something like that. Like combine it, so we're forced to question and understand and learn more history about the bad guys in whoever sense that is. One of the things also, like when it comes to like mass murderers or terrorists, the media focuses so much on the bad guy. Like what about the victims? This person had a troubled past, blah 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 blah. Like, if my family was affected, I wouldn't give a crap what his problem was. So I feel like take the same approach, not necessarily that the people whose names we want to replace have a badge of honor or courage, but they did make a mark in history so much that something was named after them. And
Correct.
by respecting history, let's give the counter side of that history.
Interesting perspective. I like that.
So, Alexander, go ahead. What do you got on this?
In my case, I am the type of person, I'm not attached to stuff. So if the basis were to change names, and at the end of the day, history is not going to be erased. Actually, it's just going to be added to. We got organizations like the Quartermaster Museum, Transportation Museum, and stuff like that, where they're gonna continue to keep the history. They're gonna continue to teach the history. Like, for example, I'm here in Fort Lee, which is one of the bases named, for the change. Uh, right now, if you go to the museums, they'll teach you the entire history of Fort Lee, where back in the day it was called Camp Lee. And evolved into what is now Fort Lee, and now is I think that at the end of the day, Fort Lee needed to be a name change anyway, because now it's no longer just an army base; it's a joint base. But in my case, Ismael was saying towards the end, some of the bases, some of the names that have been given to this base is based on people who in reality should not be deserving of it. Yes, they have an important piece in history, but was it a good important piece or a bad important piece? You know, you know that, like he mentioned, Hitler. Hitler was a big name in Germany, but it wasn't towards the good of Germany. It was towards the bad of Germany. So, do we want to continue to relieve? I don't think I would say relieve, but like continue to honor people who did not did the right thing for America. You know, and that is my thing. I know Ismail was saying something about he will feel bad. They will change because um, of the history that we as soldiers made on those bases and everything. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's gonna be loose. We're not gonna lose our legacies. With the name change of each base, because at the end of the day, the base is not what made us do what we did. Is the people who are within the base that still remember our names, remember what we did for them, and they will continue to carry the legacy regardless of the name. Like they'll be like, hey, yeah, I remember Samuel Griffin. You know, uh, back in the day when it was called this, we were together, but the story is still there. It's just a different name for the location.
So, Coach, I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts on this here, real quick?
Well, when I first started hearing about this, the first thing I'm thinking of is, here we go again with the cancel culture. We're just going to cancel something because today it's looked at different than it was before. But as a historian, it's always been amazing to me when I look back and go, why in the world are we ever memorializing people like Robert E. Lee and these people? Because if you think about it, like Jefferson Davis High School or something like that, I mean, that's unbelievable, because these people actually are traitors. They left our country and started a whole new country to fight for their rights to keep slavery and states' rights. I mean, those are the two biggest things. Of course, the number one was slavery. So why are we honoring, and how did that happen? Well, it happened because in the South tried to keep that going, even though, hey, we lost, we want to memorialize these people that fought for our cause. I don't agree with that. I don't think I'd have said this 5 years ago, but I think the name change is something that's going to happen. I think it needs to happen. And one of the things that I do look at this is, maybe the next 10 or 15, 20 years, as we're still alive, we'll still remember Fort Bragg and Fort Benning and Fort Hood as being, that also known as, remember when it was previously known as this. But 2 and 3 generations from now, they won't remember Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, and Fort Benning. And it's not a bad thing. They'll remember those good names like Rebecca was talking about. Maybe it's someone like Fort Ulysses S. Grant or Fort Abraham Lincoln. I'm just throwing those names out there that were the good things of that time period. But I still don't understand how we can even focus on Robert E. Lee. Yeah, he's a great general. He could beat anybody. He was whatever, but he fought for the side that was pro-slavery. And I don't think in 2021 that should be something that we should do. I don't know how we did it in 1921. To be honest with you, how could we ever take the losing side of a cause of a traitorous type mentality and go, let's name a base after it or a street or a high school after it? We just changed here in Tyler, Texas, that something has been around for 50 years called Robert E. Lee High School. It has a lot of history. At one time, it was called the Robert E. Lee Rebels. I mean, believe that or not. And then 20 years ago, it was changed to Robert E. Lee Red Raiders. They just changed that to Tyler Legacy. Now, right now, people are having a problem with it that went to Robert E. Lee, but those people are going to die out someday. And these new generation of kids that are coming in the future are going to be going to Tyler Legacy, which is a positive. Who doesn't want to leave a legacy? And you don't want to be going to a legacy high school that gives legacy to someone, Robert E. Lee, that fought for the wrong side. So, man, I'm telling you what, the evolution, as Alexander talked about, I've evolved so much in the last few years. Some of my people are going to jump on my Facebook and call me a traitor for doing it. But you know what? Sometimes right is right and wrong is wrong. And you know what? Come at the coach. I'm 6'4". I'm okay.
So, Coach, I got a couple comments on this here. And first of all, I got to thank Tom Cruff, who came up with this topic, because I think it's a great topic. And I apologize to the people on here because I should have asked this also. What do you think it should be changed to? We're not going to have enough time for that. I'm going to have to get some comments in real quick.
Why don't first of all, name it some of the normal soldiers that died in action?
So I'm going to give you a comment on this here. Is I talked with Tom Cruff on this, and I said, what do you name them if we don't name them what they already named? And I said, do we name them Medal of Honor recipients? And he goes, well, if we do that, we're going to find out 20 years from now that the Medal of Honor recipient by the age of 26 was still a virgin, and that's going to be socially unacceptable in the United States of America. So we're going to have to change it again. So he came up with a proposal is we name them Log Base Alpha or Camp Alpha, Fort Bravo, Fort Charlie, like that. So it just eliminates all that. So we don't do this shit again in 20 more years when we find something else that pisses everybody off that, Private Ross, Medal of Honor recipient at Fort Riley, Kansas, was not a dog lover. And that's taboo in America now, because we will evolve and there's be something else that'll piss us off later. Some things I will say, and I like that idea. Now, I will tell you, I was one that was stern on just leave well enough alone. We've done it for so long. I've heard so many people say you will never change Fort Bragg from being the center of the universe. It's still the center of the universe, nickname. You'll never change Fort Hood. Today, I walked by a guy that had a 101st, which is not Fort Campbell, is not named after a Confederate soldier, and he had the 101st Screaming Eagle on. I said, Air Assault. And he was a Vietnam vet, and he said, boy, don't you ever call me Air Assault. We were airborne. I'm like, well, it ain't airborne no more. It's Air Assault. I hate to break the news to you, man. But he was fiery about that today. So people get fiery about that that's been there, and I understand that. But I agree with Alexander. There has to be involvement and change. We just don't need to change it every whim. And I think if we do this, we need to do it as a permanent thing. And I agree with Tom Cruff. Maybe it should be Fort Alpha, Fort Bravo, maybe Fort Airborne, maybe Fort Armor, maybe Fort Light Infantry or something like that, where it can be non-disputed and it can't get into the cancel culture, Me Too, type, not Me Too. That's not the right word. I can't think of the word. But anyway, where we're worried about everybody's feelings. Like in Germany, the word Jägerschnitzel, it means hunter's steak. They are actually going after the word hunter. I'm like, how the hell would you go after the word hunter? It's a freaking Jägerschnitzel, and it's great. Shut up and appreciate it, So, but I'll also say what Ismael talked about. And Rebecca, I love your idea. I never thought of it that way, but I do kind of agree with Tom. But Ismael, on your thoughts, we walked around Germany. The barracks right next to mine still had a swastika, but you could barely see it. It's been stone washed off. You could see it, or you could see the old German Kevlar on there. You could see it, but it had been washed off. But I will also say in regards to like Hitler, they left all the concentration camps up for all to see. So there's a fine line. And then the last thing I really want to say, I know we got some comments and I'm hoping I'm not missing them, but the last line I'd really like to talk about and I talked to Ismael earlier about it. There's a book called The Bloodlands by Timothy B. Snyder, and he talked about one thing right here, how Stalin could not acknowledge the Jewish plight more than he could acknowledge the Russian plight, and he erased history and rewrote it in his country to prove that the Russians faced a greater challenge than the Jewish ever did. So what I will say is, we do this, but we have to tread lightly. And Alexander, you said they teach the history at Fort Lee. But one of the things that's also been discussed in line with this is taking the history out of the academy and everything else about Robert E. Lee. Don't ever take that out. You need to talk about Robert E. Lee. You need to talk about what he did. And because I hate to break the news there, right? He did bring some great tactics that we still use today. We cannot take that out, and we cannot fall victim of shit like that. And that's just my opinion. So we are like a minute over, but we can be all right. So I'm going to give about 30 seconds to everybody, starting with Alexander. Do you got anything?
You caught me off guard on this one. No, I had a great time. I enjoyed the conversation. Sharing the the different points of view from each one of the persons. At the end of the day, this shows, what America should be now. Regardless of what point of view we have, if it doesn't agree with the next person, we don't have to hate the person. We just have a civilized, conversation and see what the common grounds are.
Well, I'll say this: stop by woodpeckerscrafts.com and check out what Alexander has to offer. Might be something you need for Christmas. He's willing to get it to you, I'm quite sure. So check it out, please.
And
so I'm going to throw it to Ismael. I'm going to throw it to Ismael. Go ahead, Ismael.
I would just like to say that I hope your viewership got something out of it. I hope it sparks debate. I hope it expands, everybody's view. And get involved, because my understanding is that they do have a website that asks for things like things like what Rebecca said, Alexander said. So they want to know people's opinions. So just look it up. You can Google it, and let's put these things on the table.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I think that my vote is let's name one Ian Griffin.
Bam.
One of the bases that no, thank you so much for having me. I've known I always call him First Sergeant. He's not First Sergeant anymore. In my head, he will always be, but since I was 20 years old, so it's just been amazing. And if your viewer people don't like history, you got to learn it. Pick up a book and listen to a podcast. It's so amazing. Teach it to your kids. My kids are total nerds like me. We listen to history podcasts all the time. It's great. And tune into shows like this because it's very diverse.
Awesome. So, Coach, I'm going to say this before I throw it to you, is my opinion on this evolved because of the three people above us. And I'll be honest with you on that, because I was stuck on the other side, but I am open to suggestion. I'm not stuck in concrete. It might be liquid concrete, but it hadn't formed yet. I can tell you that. And I'm always willing to listen to, like, okay, that makes sense to me, and that I think that's the beauty of why we did this podcast, why we've done them, is maybe people can learn and go, well, maybe I shouldn't think exactly that way, So I'm going to throw it to you, Coach.
Well, man, just recently I wrote an article and spoke in Pittsburgh, and I said, we came from the greatest little town in the greatest country in the world, and the greatest country in the world is the United States of America. But the reason we're the greatest country in the world is not because we just have one sect of people. We have a diverse body of people that are Hispanic, that are African American, that are white, that are Italian, Asians, whatever you want to say, and we put them all together. But when you do that, you have to understand that we don't have to try to please everyone, but you should at least listen to everyone. And what we're doing now in this 21st century, and I still have some problems with it sometimes, but I'm evolving, is we have to listen to everyone. And Alexander said it, put people together, have these good debates like this, I evolved from 5 years ago, but also evolved from 30 minutes ago. And by listening to you great Americans, it got me to thinking a different way, where I'm thinking, you know, how in the hell can we memorialize someone like that? And I think just because of the way I grew up always hearing the name Robert Lee, I didn't really know what Robert Lee was. And then when you actually research it and do your own reading and you realize what he's a great military guy. There's no doubt about it. But what did he stand for? When we evolve as a country, more and more people are here besides just the ones that started it. You have to think about what would you think if you were someone else, let's say an African-American, and Robbie Lee was the high school you went to. And I've never thought that way before until recently. And I think we need to do more of it.
I agree, Coach. So we have busted our time limit. So I'm going to say from the coach
to the vets and to the vets.
Yeah, to all the vets, stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.